Perhaps the neighborhood guild had its beginning in a sewing class for the ladies of the village, which it started in the fall of 1900. They met each Wednesday afternoon in the king's daughter's room at the Memorial Hall with a local seamstress as the teacher. This small class became popular among the women of the village, increasing in membership each year. Meanwhile, Mrs. John N. Hazard, then living at her Peacedale home, the Lily Pads, watched with interest. Her husband, Mr. John N. Hazard, had passed away in the summer of 1900. In the summer of 1903, Mrs. Hazard obtained from the Peacedale MFG Co., of which her late husband had been a part owner, the use of the lower part of the big stone building as a location for what she envisioned as a village guild for the teaching to the villagers of not only sewing but other crafts. This building presently houses the Peacedale Post Office and several offices and stores. Rooms which had been used only for storage were refurbished. Equipment for cooking was installed. On September 25, 1903, it was announced that a neighborhood guild for industrial work would soon open in Peacedale for women and children over 10 years of age. Instruction was to be given in cooking, laundry work, and plain sewing and cutting. These instructions were held during the hours of 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock p.m. in rooms under the post office. On October 5, 1903, the Neighborhood Guild opened its classes with a registration of about 75 people who came to take advantage of the opportunities which were offered. Miss Elizabeth Trowbridge, a recent graduate in home economics, had been engaged to take charge of the new project. For the youthful Miss Trowbridge, it was the beginning of many happy years of association with the little village of Peacedale. This new project carried on very successfully during its first year. The following year, 1904, it was decided to take on other subjects along with sewing and cooking, something in which the men of the village might also take an interest. Classes were formed in arithmetic, English, and bookkeeping with local volunteers as instructors. Miss Mary Emmett, a recent graduate, taught the arithmetic, a high school teacher, Miss Lenora Flint, the English and letter writing, and Mr. Frank Stone, an accountant at the mill, the bookkeeping classes. There was also offered a course in French taught by a real French gentleman, Mr. Edmund John Rier, then living in Peacedale as an employee of the Solvay Press Co., also owned by the Hazard interests. Nearly 200 registered for the classes that year. In 1905 came another announcement that meant a great deal to the welfare of the townspeople, and which later led to the establishment of the South Kingstown Visiting Nurse Association. The announcement read, "The Neighborhood Guild has secured a thoroughly trained nurse to visit the sick in their homes and will do all possible for the comfort and well-being of the patients. The services of this nurse may be obtained at the request of a physician. Miss Ethel Dane of Cambridge, Mass., will serve under the auspices of the Neighborhood Guild. There will be a reception held for her on Saturday evening, November 8th, from 7 to 9 o'clock. All are cordially invited to meet Miss Dane and give her a hearty welcome." And so the Neighborhood Guild in November 1905 started a service which all through the years has been important to the health and welfare of the people of South Kingstown, the South Kingstown Visiting Nurse. Also in 1905, the mill company renovated the old hall on the upper floor of the building and made it available to the guild for larger classes and their social parties. This at one time had been the scene of all Peacedale's social activities. The part of the second floor above the guild classrooms, which at times had been used as a boarding house for mill operatives, was also renovated and made into living quarters for Miss Trowbridge, her assistant Miss Shoemaker, the nurse, and school teachers from out of town, all who had found it difficult to get suitable boarding places in the village. In 5 short years, the Neighborhood Guild had begun to take a major role in the affairs of Peacedale and the surrounding territory. On April 3, 1908, it was announced that Peacedale was to have a village green. There had been a small playground in what had been termed a village green in the south part of the mill yard, but now the big 3 two-story tenements, which stood on the location of the present green, were to be moved away, and a real village green laid out. At this time, also the mill tenements, which then occupied the site of the present guild, were moved back, and the fire station, which stood by the Columbia Street entrance, was moved up the street, leaving a larger clear piece of land there. This made the setting for the announcement made by Mrs. John N. Hazard at the annual meeting of the Guild on June 25, 1908. She announced that the neighborhood guild was to have a new building, situated across the river from the village green. It was to be erected as a memorial to John N. Hazard by his widow and children. The Peasdale MFG Co. deeded the land to Mrs. Hazard on July 1, 1908. Construction of the new building started on July 10th with the Boston firms of R. Clipston Sturgis as an architect, and Woodbury and Leighton the builders. It was finished by the following summer, and the dedication took place on Saturday, September 11, 1909. The dedication in memory of John N. Hazard was made by his widow and children, namely Mrs. Augusta G. Hazard, John C. Hazard, Isaac P. Hazard, Edith Hazard, Mrs. Rowland R. Robinson, and Mrs. Daniel Reese. Mr. John C. Hazard acted as a master of ceremonies, and President James B. Angel of Brown University was the main speaker of the day. Brief remarks were made by Mrs. Hazard and the guild director, Miss Elizabeth Trowbridge, who spoke of her plans for the neighborhood guild of the future. And so another beautiful structure was added in South Kingstown to the others which had been gifts to their town by the Hazard family. It was a beautiful building, fully equipped with the latest facilities. It included large classrooms, well furnished for sewing and cooking, a laundry for use by the town people, shower rooms for boys and girls, a well-appointed shop for classes in woodworking, an office for the visiting nurse, and a fine hall for entertainments, games, and dancing. This building was one of the first in the United States to be dedicated to such an effort in social betterment. All through the years which followed under the efficient and able management of Miss Trowbridge and her staff, the Neighborhood Guild contributed to almost every form of social and family life in South Kingstown. The classes were filled at every new registration, more subjects were added, local women made good use of the laundry facilities, and the living quarters for the guild staff and high school teachers were maintained for many years. Perhaps many now coming of age, I mean old age of course, can remember those Tuesday night dances in the hall when Miss Belle Perkins and Miss Anna Wallace showed us the latest steps, and then later in the evening turned us loose to try them out to the inspiring music furnished by Ben and Emily Eaton. Also amateur shows were held. One in particular I remember when Mr. Summer Mowry and Jess Torgy performed on the fiddles, accompanied by Howard Torgy on the bones. Howard's enthusiasm caused one of the audience to say that it sounded to him like a lot of static, which most of us remember was rather prevalent in the radios of those days. From the floor of that neighborhood guild hall went out those winning basketball teams under Captain Jimmy Negrelli with Moog Wilbur and Nick Martilla to at least once capture the basketball championship of all New England. Miss Trowbridge resigned at the end of the school year in 1931, after 30 years of dedicated service to the town and neighborhood guild. She was succeeded by Miss Emma Ho and later by Miss Helen Wilson, who left to join the Red Cross overseas service at the beginning of World War II. As the years went by and activities at the guild increased several-fold, the members of the Hazard family felt themselves unable to continue longer with its operation, and on April 1st, 1940, the Town Council of South Kingstown most graciously accepted the gift to the town of South Kingstown of the Neighborhood Guild from the John N. Hazard family. With it came an endowment fund of $315,000, all in gilded securities, which over the years have greatly increased in value and income, so that all of the many recent alterations and improvements at the building and much of its maintenance is now taken care of without expense to the town. The council at that time created the Recreation Commission to administer the guild affairs, as well as the later acquired Village Green and Old Mountain Field. It is not my intention to go into the later history of the guild. We all know that well how it has grown under the administration of the Recreation Commission and their chosen directors, all who have served efficiently and well. It has been my thought in this article to describe the early beginning of a dream and effort which has grown into the Neighborhood Guild of today. In closing, I might like to mention the names of the various directors of the Guild since 1903. Miss Elizabeth E. Trowbridge for 30 years, Miss Emma Ho, Miss Helen Wilson, Miss Fanny Brickley, Mr. James Tyler, Mr. Richard Harmon, Mr. Gerald Cox, Mr. Harry McFarland, Mr. Ronald Packard, Mrs. Bruce Nielsen, and Mr. Ralph Coppa. It has been a privilege It has been the privilege of each to have had a part in the direction and growth of an institution which, starting from a small beginning, is now a major part of South Kingstown and another of the beautiful and useful gifts to their town from the Hazard family.